losing access to Google Docs might be like a truly cruel thing. Like I think there's few things in life that I don't know how I would recover from, but like there's nothing there is no equivalent capability to Google Docs. Like it's kind of crazy. Like nobody else wants to do the whole operational transforms, like the complexity of trying to do like a truly collaborative, like real-time platform. It's like genuinely a really hard thing to do. So like even if you look at like Microsoft Office, like their cloud offering, it's still this bullshit of like you save a doc and somebody opens a doc. Like nobody's on the same thing at the same time. So like
Didn't
there's
Dropbox try with like paper? I believe Dropbox paper was supposed to be like an alternative, an attempt to
I don't
compete.
know. I don't know. I mean like I would love this is
But
a
you're right.
space where like I would love to see more just because it's crazy to me that that it's such an unevenly distributed capability. But there's as far as I know, there is no real one-to-one replacement for something like Google Docs. Like we
I
can
don't
all
know why we're
comment
talking about
together
Google Docs.
Proton docs.
because like losing access to it would genuinely like hurt, right? Like
I
it
agree. Hey, listen, we
but
use Google Docs for our
that's right. The
Bro,
soft power of
transcripts.
Google Docs, bro.
The
Like
soft
think about
power
it
of
this way.
transcripts. Yeah.
We used to do APT investigations that were all on Threema and Signal, and we would like leave our phones
then
and
the
go
final
walk
report is
outside and
sitting on a
chat,
Google Doc.
and then we would all get together and write it in a fucking Google Doc. We're like, it's okay. NSA will be very comfortable with this. They know where we're going. They can send us comments if they need to. Keep moving, bro.
Man, it was part of the strategy. Like the worst
Yeah.
thing is when people get surprised. So we didn't want anyone to be surprised by our
Those were the
publications.
OPSEC classes. That's what we talked about. Keep
Absolutely.
everybody comfortable. Make
And,
everyone
and
comfortable.
I remember what you taught us. Do not upset the tail.
Do not
That's true.
upset the tail.
Yeah,
TAIL
man.
tail.
Yeah. Yeah, people can
Expand.
fucking it's like because the problem with nerds thinking that we're playing at like James Bond shit is you grow this like inflated sense of that you're somehow going to like deprive
you're
people of
disrupting.
access to you and you're going to disrupt these things. In reality, what you're doing is making people suspicious. Like there's a reason that the Moscow rules were don't look over your shoulder. Yes, you're being followed. Yes, they're watching you. Don't look suspicious. Don't even look aware of the fact that they're aware of you. Just accept it and keep walking. Don't be weird. Don't freak them out. This notion that like we get super all this like OPSEC training originally, like all the early on adoption of like, oh, we're gonna get OPSEC for security researchers. It was like a guide for getting arrested. Because you were just like, act as weird and as difficult to understand as possible. Be erratic. Make them think that you're about to like blow
Stand
up
out
a
in
train
the crowd.
station. Stand out as much as possible. Do not let them get any information about what you're up to. It's like, bro, you're gonna get black bagged. Look as transparent as possible. Be as boring as possible.
Use
Use
Google
G-Doc.
Docs.
Use Google Docs.
Good morning, everyone. This is episode 81 of the Three Body Problem. It's Friday, January 16th here in Phoenix, Arizona, joined by my buddies Costin Raiu out in Bucharest, Juanito in Washington, D.C. I don't know where to start. Let's start in Washington, D.C. I'm just curious, Juan, what is the mood, tone, vibe in Washington, D.C. as it relates to Venezuela, Maduro? Has all that kind of settled down and become last week's news? And I ask because there is New York Times reporting on cyber effects as part of the Venezuela thing. In Washington, D.C., is that a hot button topic in your circles? Do you have circles there that like this is becoming a thing?
Do you have circles? About the Venezuela part?
All of it, all of it. Like, I'm just curious if you guys have a heightened sense of cyber there in your circles versus a year ago, what the tone was.
I think that so there let's separate those things out just a little bit, right? Like is DC talking and freaking out about like Venezuela? No, because we're already freaking out about Greenland or Iran. I don't know. There's just so many things happening. Everyone's freaking out. We're just not entirely sure what to freak out about, right? Is it about cyber? Not really. Like I think it depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to somebody that like knows what they're talking about, they don't seem to take the cyber angle of this very seriously. Like, it's not to say that it isn't a factor, right? Like what we talked about last time. I think cyber is like decisive in being able to do such like tactically precise operations, but I don't think the cyberkinetic angle really played as big a role here as people are saying. That's my sense of things.
The
That
New York
said,
Times has fresh reporting that says the cyber attack that plunged Venezuela into darkness demonstrated the Pentagon's
Bro.
ability not just to turn off the lights, but also allow them to turn it back on, which says this was not kinetic. At least one or parts of the blackout might not have been totally kinetic. What do you make of that?
I don't know what to make of it because it's the New York Times, and I hate to put it that way because that plays into certain narratives in DC in particular about mainstream media, and that's not what I mean. It's just that the New York Times has never been one for accuracy in their cyber reporting. They like narratives. They like nice, clean narratives that further specific conversations. Like it's more like the New York Times is writing for like Thanksgiving dinner conversations. Like you want to hit all the like high
Dinner
points and the
parties.
concepts. Yeah, like you want to talk about you want to have some good stuff to talk about around like the embassy cocktail room. But the accuracy of it could not matter less. It like there may not have been an attack, and that's why like people hear me like rant about Nicole Perlroth, and like I'm sure it sounds really mean spirited, but like part of the issue was we would get into these things about reporting where you're like that Maryland story about like the ransomware and whatever. We literally like experts came out just to be like, this is not at all based on anything accurate. Like this is not like technically the incident you're describing did not work this way at all. And we were told to pound
There was
sand.
no appetite for correction or no
There was
appetite
no
for
interest
amplification even, yeah.
whatsoever in correcting or engaging, or even like the thing that can often happen is, look, this is already a big story. Sorry. I will call you next time there is one just so we can get the story straight. Never. Like there was just like, there's no interest whatsoever. Shut the fuck up. Like we've got some good stories to tell and we're not going to let facts get in the way of those good stories. So now when you see this, do I think there's a good story to be told? Absolutely. Do I think it has anything to do with reality? I doubt it. And there's enough people who are trying to push the cyber angle to have policy discussions and to have
wanted to ask,
soft power
why is the New York
discussions.
Times report? So why are U.S. officials telling the New York Times that this was one of the most public displays of offensive U.S. cyber capabilities in recent years, and that the U.S. military also used cyber weapons to interfere with air defense radar? That didn't work, by the way. I mean, the radar itself didn't work, but according to this New York Times reporting that cyber weapons was actually used. We're not doubting that there was a cyber component to all of this. Obviously, from espionage all the way through, there's obviously effects everywhere.
Right.
When things appear in the New York Times, there's a reason and a purpose for it. That's very wrong.
I just think that it doesn't. Factuality is not a requirement. It's about like the way I see it is like if somebody had put like a forum post or someone wrote an op-ed. That's how I would feel about it. If somebody wrote an op-ed and was like, if we cybered in Venezuela, what should we think and feel about it? And you go, okay, well, this is what we maybe should think and feel about it, but did we? And it's like, don't worry about it. Did we doesn't matter. It's just if we did it, how should we think and feel about it? And that's kind of how it plays out with the New York Times. Now, I hope that I will eat crow, and in a week, somebody more stringent is going to come out with a much better report that says multiple cyber operators from Cyber Command and the CIA and whatever have reported that we did this and this worked and this didn't work. And or like the truth of the story is probably closer to we prepared, we had access, we did some early things, and then we realized that the Venezuelans have been asleep at the wheel for like 10 fucking years. And even if like they couldn't get their pants on fast enough to realize that by the time they thought about maybe engaging some anti-aircraft shit, we had already gotten Maduro out of there. Like they've just been so asleep at the wheel this whole fucking time. I think that's closer to reality. It doesn't take away from the unbelievable tactical success. Like I said last time, please do not minimize the insanity of being able to pull something like this off. That said, you don't get the sense that the Venezuelans were like super keyed in. Like they were not
Yeah.
like on their A game. Like those dudes were asleep at the wheel for half of it.
Costin, are you as dismissive of New York Times reporting like Juanito is? When you read this story, what do you feel is being?
I have absolutely. I've said it for many, many years that whatever kind of reporting the New York Times is pushing out is unfortunately more often inaccurate than accurate. So from that point of view, the history is not very positive. But in this particular case, I'm the guy who is like, I want to believe, we can
Yeah.
hope. I mean,
Yeah.
and I tell you why I kind of believe this, because there are like certain keywords in this story which make me think that somebody needs this story to be out there. And in particular, they're emphasizing two keywords here. They say powerful and precise. And coupling cyber weapons with powerful and precise effects, I think this is something that you need to have, and this is something that you need to talk about in 2026. Because a lot of discussions around cyber weapons are, like Stuxnet, it escaped into the internet, it shut down thousands of unrelated targets, hospitals are being affected by ransomware. It's like the cyber apocalypse. So this is when you need, if you want to use cyber warfare, and if you want to use tools for cyber attacks, then you need to start pushing this narrative that cyber is powerful and cyber is precise. So I do think that someone wanted to have this story out so they can justify more investments, more money, letters of mark for cyber
Wait. Okay.
operations, as
So
long
there,
as they are precise.
Costin, there you hit something really interesting. I I think that I really appreciate your perspective, especially being like a, away from the bullshit, the way that it's presented in the U.S. Right? Like we're so used to our own
And
internal
DC
struggles
is
and
even
interests,
more.
especially DC, because when you frame it that way, I think that you're absolutely right that somebody needs to tell the story on these terms. And you know where, powerful and precise gets defined? Well, when you talk about things coming from within the government, within the immediate control of the cyber operators who work inside of the government, as opposed to private sector offensive privateers who may be given letters of marque. So if you want to talk about what story is playing out in this New York Times, in the way the New York Times is presenting the narrative, well, it's actually how much should we depend on external privateers that we can't trust to be precise and powerful and in control and to have restraint and to not start not to deepen a war where one is not needed, not to do something stupid that creates like, remember how the narrative around this has always gone is this like bizarre notion that cyber is escalatory, and if you're not careful, then if some idiot hacks just the wrong thing, World War III will start, which we never understood that argument. But the point was, this is why cyber should live only inside of NSA, only inside of CIA, only at Cyber Command, where people have restraint, where lawyers are in the room. And look, it's a valid argument. I'm not mocking it. I'm just saying, I think if you want to talk about what interests are at war in this battle of ideas that because that's what the New York Times usually reports on, is just like a battle of ideas, disconnected from reality, then I think that's where you see it. It's letters of marque versus, the devil inside of the house that is going to do things the right way, quote unquote.
Do you think this precise and powerful language ties into this, push around privatizing offense?
That I think it's the counter argument. That's what I'm saying. Like there's two camps here. There's the camp that wants it to stay in the house, and those people are saying we do things with precision and complete control. We don't stay on the wrong box or flip the wrong switch or accidentally turn off the power in the wrong substation, we're accountable. If we ever do something wrong, you know who you're going to send to prison, but that's never going to happen because we never do anything wrong. That's the argument for this is why you keep it inside of the house. And then the other side is saying, no, we need to take more chances. We need more people involved. There's people with greater access. There's things the private sector can do that the inside can't do. We are not doing enough cyber operations. Look at all the ransomware actors that get to do whatever they want and nobody ever stops them.
So that's the competing camps really.
Those are the two. That's the thesis and antithesis that we're currently seeing kind of like battling it out. And, you know, in true Hegelian fashion, we'll eventually get a dialectical synthesis of both. But for now, we're just seeing like the A and B. And like, look,
and you think Costin nailed it with just picking out this use of precise and powerful language?
I think that language, like the only thing that would have been more telling is if they had used the word exquisite. But we're not going to go there. So just precise and powerful is good enough, right?
So look out for exquisite later on.
Well, I think if it had been exquisite, I would have thought it came out of a specific house. But because it's precise and powerful, to me, I'm assuming this is coming out of the DoD, or I should say DOW now, in some capacity. And DOW is a pretty big beast. So wherever in DOW that came from, you know, we see you, we hear you. And I don't know where this battle is going to go. What I did want to say is like we really very quickly like shivved the New York Times and New York Times left them out to bleed. I will say something. I was thinking about this the other day because a good friend of mine speaks highly of David Sanger, and I have been pretty dismissive of Sanger, even though, to be completely honest, I have never directly spoken to Sanger. I've just had like, you know, I've taken exception with some of his reporting, but to be precise about what I'm taking exception with, David Sanger has unbelievable levels of access in this city. People tell him things that you would never expect to be discussed openly. My complaint has always been, I just wish that David would then avail himself of a few good experts in threat intel and in cyber and hacking or whatever, who would then help him question that narrative a little more stringently, like be able to go back to the people in the government who are telling him things they should never tell him and say, okay, I get it, but how does that work? Because I'm being told that this, and this doesn't work that way. That's the one thing that I just would love to add, because his access is unparalleled. Like nobody else is getting somebody to sit down from the White House or from or NSA or wherever and be like, yeah, we shut all this shit down and we did X, Y, and Z. He's just missing that fly in the wall that goes, yeah, but ask them how they did that because this thing doesn't make sense.
Right.
So that's my olive branch about like, it's not like he's a bad person or like they're all evil people or any of that bullshit. I think it's too easy to get lost in developing the narrative, and you very quickly in cyber, because there's so little on the ground, there's so little like friction from reality, it's very easy to just get off the beaten path like way too quickly, way too far.
Yeah, just to go on a little slight tangent on Sanger, I think, and I'm glad you mentioned Nicole Portrat's name, because I felt like a lot of the times, even with all the problematic reporting and the inability to correct things or the unwillingness to even listen to corrections.
What corrections?
Portrat took the brunt of it publicly, and Sanger skated. Yeah. And his byline was, in most cases, in front of hers in those dual reported stories of the time, the ones we're talking about. And Sanger skated and Portrat took a lot of the heat. Well, she was going back at it, and that caused a little bit. But
there's the thing, right? Like, to be fair, it wasn't just, you know, some kind of pure misogyny or something like that. Like, if you said something, David Sanger would ignore you. Nicole Perlroth would fucking
be combative,
go be super combative. Like I remember old Twitter threads where it was just like, it was personal, like it was just mean. And you're like, dude,
I used to be the one saying, guys.
Yeah, you would tell me to stop. But but I have never had that experience with any other reporter. Any other reporter, if you were like, hey, this doesn't sound right. God forbid you said that in a tweet wherever anybody else would
they're
see.
scrambling back channel to get it like
scramble, be like, oh God, what did I do wrong? Like what can we do? Like why? Like how do we fix this? Nicole Perlroth would tell you to go fuck yourself. It should just be like, oh, well, I'm sorry if reality doesn't agree with you. And we're like, I have the sample. What do you mean? Like, it was invalidating at a level that you just didn't know what to do with.
Bad tangent. Costin, you remember when you and I were on the phone with David Sanger once?
Of course.
Do you remember where we were?
Bro, let's embrace that this is going to be like a tangents episode and just go with
No.
it.
Dublin? Was it in Dublin?
It was in Dublin, and he never wrote the story. We pre-briefed him on.
Why do you think that David Sanger skipped our story then?
Which story was this? When you say Dublin, I'm thinking it's the bet, right?
It's the bet, yes.
The bet.
You guys are going inside baseball on the audience here.
Fuck you. You brought it up. Tell them what the story was, man. You already started us.
I was just
was a time of fears, and never have we looked at a car more suspiciously before. You're just like, where does the team
for security researchers?
Yeah.
I don't want to lose the track of the Venezuela offense cyber thing, because there's a big story bubbling in Europe around a massive cyber attack on a Polish power system in December that supposedly failed. We have the Polish government coming out and kind of saying some things, documenting some things. Our friend Ruben Santa Marta actually published something on LinkedIn today that goes into what really happened in Poland, part 1. Costin, this thing is kind of setting off nerves. Spidey senses. What do you read? What do you make of what happened?
To be honest, I skipped the story when it originally came out, because there were almost no details whatsoever.
No IOX.
No IOX. And then when it comes from the very top of, let's say, some government organization and it's being pushed by politicians, then usually the facts are distorted or twisted. And especially with no technical details available on that, you don't know what to make of it. But if this was if this actually happened for real, I think it would be a huge escalation of Russia's war on Ukraine.
What happened? Can you give a little bit of background on what the reporting is saying?
So what it kind of claims, so the whole story is about the idea that Russia tried to launch a very destructive cyber attack against Poland's electricity infrastructure that would have affected 500,000 people. The kind of things they've done in Ukraine over the years with things like black energy, talking about, of course, the so-called sandworm group, GRU unit. So something similar to that taking place in Poland, so in the European Union, we're talking about NATO, a NATO country. That would be just crazy, kind of unheard of. So you don't know what to make of it. Like, what does it mean if this actually would have happened for real? Was that enough to justify an escalation of things, like true war between NATO and Russia and so on? What about attribution? There's so many questions here. And I read Ruben's analysis, which is great as always. So there's a lot of tiny details out there in the communication from government officials. Everyone is saying tiny bits of information, which if you know what to listen for, and if you're familiar with the language and the terminology, then you basically can put together maybe kind of a picture which suggests that something must have happened. What I am personally hoping for is that one of these serious companies have been looped in to do incident response and investigate. Hopefully, maybe, I don't know, Mandiant or another big company doing incident response and then publishing a report. I think that would be the best course of action. If we could have the IOX, if we could have a detailed report, a timeline, things like that, that would be fantastic. But at the moment, it's very hard to know what to think. About something like the possibility of Russia targeting the electricity in a NATO country and potentially affecting 500,000 people.
Ruben also kind of links to parallels with similar attacks in Spain, Juan. Were we familiar? Are we overlooking a lot of little signs and things happening in Europe? Is Poland kind of ground zero for a lot of unseen things?
I'm not sure. I was actually really happy to see Ruben, of all people, kind of get on this because, like, if I could take a minute just to like gush about what a great researcher Ruben Santamarta is, he's the one that I linked up with him when we discovered acid rain, which was what the Russians used during the infamous Viasat attack at the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine. And Ruben is an amazing researcher, not just when it comes to all these like embedded devices, but also whenever these incidents go down that are sort of like cyberkinetic in Europe, he's usually the guy that like somehow gets his hands on like the devices. He like goes and actually understands the protocols. Like he's doing the hardcore like hardware RE side of some of these things to understand how these systems actually work. So if you if you really want to look back at an amazing piece of work that he did, Kim Setter had a great story where she covered Ruben's research into this incident at the Chernobyl exclusion zone where there alarms had been going off basically saying there had been like a radiation leak. And it's really interesting because Ruben goes to research like how these systems work and how that could have happened, and he like basically systematically goes through all the possibilities, or like this idea that like the tanks were kicking up dust, and it's like, yeah, that doesn't work that way. It's been however many years, all the roads have been cleaned, like it's not going to do that. Like what if the systems didn't work? Like what if the sensors had not worked? Well, the sensors don't work this way. They work so he kind of systematically goes through it, and eventually the conclusion that forms is that it most likely was the Ukrainians having set off that alarm in order to try to drive the Russians out of the Chernobyl exclusion zone out of fear that radiation was leaking, which is brilliant. But it's one
Data
thing to
manipulation
tell,
more than, yeah.
To our previous point, it would have been one thing for Kim Zetter to tell that story because some random Ukrainian official told her a nice story. It's different to tell that story with Ukrainian sources
With a subject matter fact
an
check,
80-page report from a technical researcher who has gone through and done, he did the math, right, for lack of a better word.
Did
So
you pick this talk for last year's, like one of your best research list a year ago?
Yeah,
it was, right?
definitely,
Yeah,
I
just
put
remember
it as one of the talks, like, and I had the honor and the pleasure of being one of the people Ruben called to at least go like, hey, how would this work? Can you find some of this? Like, let's look at some of this software, and to add like my 2 cents into what was a very holistic and comprehensive approach, which is much better than just like if you focus on the malware, right? Like, yeah, possibility, like the anti-report that we talked about maybe a week
Last
or two
week,
ago,
yeah.
right? Like that's the kind of armchair speculation that you can do when you focus only on cyber. You sit and you go, well, this is what we know about cyber. This is what we know about this organization, this actor. So surely, what they did is probably something like this. It's very different when you take a comprehensive approach and you go, okay, cyber could be an element, but then also what about electronic warfare? What about, physical disruptions? What about physical sabotage, right? Like Ruben tends to take that approach, and he gets much further along with some of these things. So in that same spirit, when you look at his LinkedIn article, he's talking about this like Iberian or like Spanish blackout. And part of the thing there is it lends itself to a better understanding of the systems involved. But what he's saying, if I read it correctly, because like I read this like 10 minutes before we started recording, like that's when we found the link. If I read this correctly, like the Spanish one was one where cyber was assumed, but it doesn't seem to have been the case. And I think then you get into this Polish one, and okay, the government is saying that it was cyber, and we're not saying that they're wrong, but you have to go into it with the kind of skepticism that at least I'm not saying everybody's lying. I'm not saying the polls are wrong, but there are so many possible ways this could have happened that immediately going to this was cyber or this was done in this specific way, it doesn't lend itself well, right? Like, are we talking about a DDoS attack? Are we talking about trying to flood a very particular type of protocol that only works for these systems? Are we talking about like a vulnerability in the particular firmware of specific devices? Are we talking about, we know this sabotage unit that the Russians employ also involves people going on the ground. Are we talking about them using specific kind of devices to transmit on a frequency that isn't internet enabled? It's more about like RF repeaters doing X, Y, and Z. Like, there's just so much more nuance to how you can do this that still makes the vague and abstract claim that these politicians are making true. But it isn't in the way that we immediately assume. So, it's just to go back to your original statement about this. Like, I would love to see the fucking IOCs, right? Like, Hegel and I and Max, Ruben Santamarta, and Max van Amerongen, like some of these folks, like we've all worked on like acid rain and acid pour, and we really care about these things. People worked on Destroyer 1 and 2. Like, these are important incidents. And Lindsey Freeman's been trying to drive like an ICC claim against the Russians of like using cyber against essentially as a war crime because you were trying to shut off the power in winter to civilian populations. So clearly we really care about this shit, and we're happy to support the Polish and the Spanish and whomever else may be facing this, but you got to give us a little more. Like, this is one of those areas where like details do really, really matter.
Costin, the Polish energy minister in his disclosure said the failed attack aimed to disrupt the communication between renewable installations and power distribution operators. And Ruben's thing, he also talks about targeting the communication layer between these renewable installations and grid operators. And I'm going to ask a stupid question right out. Could this possibly be some research project of someone trying to track how renewable things are connected to the internet? Or we think that this is a real Russia versus Poland cyber attack? In the absence of IOCs, we can only ask questions. What does your gut tell you?
Well, this story in Spain, which was pretty big in Europe, I think it deserves a bit of attention because it kind of emphasizes an interesting vulnerability in the electricity networks nowadays. So if you remember that case in Spain, what happened there is, electricity can be produced through different means. It can come from burning coal or burning gas. It can be hydro, so waterfalls and dams. It can be nuclear, and then it can be renewables like wind or sun or waves. So what is interesting here is that while the other types of electricity production are kind of predictable, so you can predict the output of these things. Renewables are very, very, unpredictable and ephemeral. So let's say that if it's solar panels, if it's suddenly, it's no longer shiny, if there's like some clouds, the output drops like in a matter of seconds. If the wind starts blowing or just stops blowing out of a sudden, the electricity output drops or immediately, it grows to levels which can cause all sorts of problems. And I think this was the core issue in Spain in last summer, that in order to integrate more and more renewables into the networks, you need a very good synchronization communication between them and the other sources of electricity. And if this communication is somehow disrupted or delayed, then you have huge risks of burning, disconnecting power stations, burning things. So I think that this is a very interesting attack vector. Obviously, someone saw that story in Spain and they said, like, how can we weaponize this intermix of renewables and conventional electricity sources? Can we do something like, we don't even have to let's say, target the power station directly. We don't have to infiltrate the power station and shut down UPSs like they did in the past, or I don't know, God forbid, try to explode them or things like that. What if we just disrupt the communication between renewables and the other classical sources, and see if that is enough to cause a wide power shutdown like it happened in Spain. And it is a very, very scary attack vector. And actually, I was talking to a number of people in the energy sector in Romania, and I was surprised that they were extremely upset by the uncontrollable deployment of renewable sources into our electricity network. So what they were complaining is that um, there's no kind of provisions for this strategy, and more people, they just put solar panels, they put wind turbines, and this is creating kind of a huge risk because of this very delicate synchronization between renewables and the classical energy sources that you need to have. So I think there might be something here in this story. There might be something in the sense that it's possible that somebody designed this as a kind of an attack and they try to execute it. It's hard to say exactly who might have been behind that, but in my mind, I'm thinking that a cyber attack that aims to disrupt the communication between renewable installations and power distribution operators has higher chances of not getting discovered and attributed than other more visible types of cyber attacks. So sure, this can actually be one of these weaknesses that is growing in Europe, and in the future it can be targeted even more because it seems to be very fragile and very exposed to potential sabotage.
Is there a Poland cert that is the equivalent of the Ukraine cert that can provide some of this?
There is for sure. The Polish cert, actually, they're super active, and over the years they published all sorts of tools, databases, knowledge, information. They, I think, they also published reports on APT28 in the past that I have seen. They're not as active as the Ukrainian cert. The Ukrainian cert is probably the most active cert in the world when it comes to APT reports, sharing IOCs, and all that stuff. That's the Ukrainian cert. They're like the most active. But the Polish cert is also, I think, quite capable, and I've seen them publish reports in the past. So maybe
I'm on their website right now. They're not very active. The last 3 posts were from April 2025, June 2025, and then November 2025. So from April to June, we got 3 kind of analysis of some stuff. But hopefully we get something. Shout out to the guys from the cert. Poland cert, if you got something for us, give us some IOC so we can have something to talk about.
I think they used to share some tools and stuff. Yeah. Like I think it's kind of like, it comes and goes, right? If you have people there who are up for it. But yeah, always happy to see more.
This week, Juanito, are you a Verizon user?
No, absolutely not.
Verizon had a nationwide outage. My phone was on SOS all day. Does it surprise you now that immediately our minds go to cyber when these things happen, especially with typhoons swirling around telco infrastructure? Or is Conspiracy Ryan going crazy?
Mine doesn't. I think it speaks to a lot more like of the general awareness that more people think of it as possibly cyber. But having seen what cyber looks like in telcos in the US, and then what incidents look like in telcos in the US, and how separate those two usually are. Like, I just think people don't have an appreciation for how complex telco systems are. And even I don't. I just, I've gotten to sit next to much smarter people who are responsible for some of these things, and just listening to them talk to the compounding complexities of, for example, trying to reboot a telco network, trying to re-register hundreds of thousands of devices without it crashing a system that was only meant to have throughput for a certain amount of them registering at the same time. It wasn't expecting everybody to get dropped off and then everybody to have to re-register. Like this is one of those areas where it's definitely not held together by duct tape. I just think we have managed to, and when I say we, I mean humanity has managed to do something incredibly complex so well that we take it for granted. And when something doesn't go right, like a little DNS hiccup or something shuts down, like a whole data center shuts off and then tries to turn on, then you suddenly see just how fucking hard this thing is and just how much it takes to keep it running, because those are the moments when you go, holy fuck, getting this back together is a significant effort. So cyber is the least of my. I'm not saying it's the least of.
Cyber is the first thing that pops into my head.
I'm
I don't
sure
know
it does.
how it
Just
does
like
it.
because
When all
in
of
my
Verizon is
head,
down for 8 hours in a single day, it's pretty significant disruption here in the United States. I would argue
I
Verizon is the biggest. Do you think, in terms of
no, well,
consumer?
I don't know that Verizon is the biggest. I'm assuming AT&T is the biggest. Like, there's a lot of different shapes to this, but my point is not that cyber is inconsequential. My point is that um,
There's a
there's
million other things that could cause this in addition to cyber. Cyber's.
it's just such black magic and such an unbelievable thing that like we can keep this distributed organism running flawlessly for everybody all the fucking time. Like, dude, when I was in middle school and I had my first cell phone, we were still on WAP. Like, I got to watch this shit go from you're lucky if you transmit 5 kilobytes to get like a shitty mobile website on a phone, to like, oh, if I'm getting less than a 70 megabit per second downstream, this is a piece of shit, right? Like, it's easy to kind of forget the level of development until things go wrong. And and I think DNS is one of those things, for example, that humbles all of us, that reminds us just how much like we need to still have respect for how brittle these things are, how much defensive engineering and ingenuity it takes to keep a giant system running healthy like that, how many edge cases and things you don't think about are important when it comes to these things, and that there's going to be little conflagrations and unexpected things where like the power went out in a place in Virginia that happens to be next to a data center that didn't have enough diesel in its generators, so it went off even though it shouldn't have. And all of a sudden, the DNS servers that handled all of the registration, like all of the routing for all of the phones in the East Coast, can't connect at the same time, and then they all try to connect to the backup at the same time, and then that crashes, and you have like a rolling set of problems. That's when you realize how unbelievably complex these systems are that we've created, and how grateful we should be to some cosmic order that they somehow work most days instead of not working most days.
That complexity serves as a little bit of a protection mechanism because you can't reliably say this is how it's supposed to work. And to your point, Verizon has actually confirmed that this extreme service outage was not caused by a cybersecurity breach, but was quote unquote some kind of software problem, which plays into your thing. It could be a million different things. The quote from Verizon is, just to close the loop on this: this was a software issue and we are conducting a full review of what happened. As of now, there is no indication this was a cybersecurity issue. So they had to get out in front of it because obviously conspiracy Ryans are asking, whoa, cyber.
Conspiracy, the many conspiracy Ryans out there with their many tinfoil hats.
Me and my minions. This week, Costin, you actually published a blog post on your Medium blog doing a roundup of what's happening. Speaking of outage and internet in Iran, we had shout out to Hamid for coming on last week and helping us to kind of decipher what was going on. Since then, the New York Times and the other front pages have determined something is happening in Iran. And you guys poured through some data. What were you able to determine around internet outage there, the disconnection? What was the purpose of this blog that you put out?
Well, first of all, shout outs to Hamid, who inspired me to research this issue. And I thought
This
it was
is using
interesting.
your TLP Black?
I use pretty much
Some of
everything that is available to me. So that includes our own data sources in TLP Black, our own passive DNS, our own DNS telemetry, DNS server changes, all these kind of things, and as well as public sources such as Cisco Umbrella, such as Cloudflare, Radar. So I took just everything that was available to to me at that time. And keep in mind, like, what was the context? If you remember, like at the beginning of this week, everyone was kind of expecting the U.S. to strike Iran. I think Trump said that help is on the way, and to me, it seemed like there was a lot of signaling going on there. I mean, nobody expected Trump to strike Venezuela, and it happened. Nobody expected Trump to actually bomb Fordo with the B-2 spirits, and he did it. And now there was just too much happening. So I kind of said, like, this is interesting, although I don't think it will actually turn into some military action, but I mean, who knows? Anyways, from network point of view, the thing is that the internet in Iran has been down for longer than ever. So this is the longest shutdown of internet in Iran in the history of this country. And as Hamid said the last time, what does it mean that the internet is down? Well, most Western things are down, but at the same time, some things kind of work. And the fact that there is telemetry of what's happening in Iran is kind of an indication that some things still work. Now, what I noticed is that compared to, let's say, the entirety of the last year, or in particular last month in September, so what I looked was popularity of DNS requests coming from Iran in September, October, November, December, and then see what's new right now in January compared to that. So some of the things which attracted my attention was the fact that on one hand, Chinese banks, in particular the websites of two Chinese banks, were kind of spiking, entering top 100. And I discussed
Two
this
Chinese banks in Iran. Wait, you gotta back up. You can't just throw China in there and just like randomly like this. What are you talking about?
I'm talking about the fact that the websites of Chinese, of some Chinese banks are suddenly, let's say, very popular in Iran. And I was talking to Hamid, like, what might be the reason? Why are these banks suddenly popular in Iran? And he was suggesting that perhaps there's some credit card brokers in Iran. So people who can actually sell you credit cards that you can use online to buy VPNs, for instance. So, or tools that allow you to bypass internet censorship. So he was thinking
circumvention economy.
Yeah, maybe these credit card brokers in Iran, they're buying these cards from these Chinese banks, and now they're like buying them extensively. So there's like more of this happening than the usual. The reason is why, because obviously Iran, people in Iran can't work with Western banks, so they have to rely on things like Chinese resources, Russian resources. So one explanation could be that they're just trying to buy those credit cards from these Chinese banks so they can buy other services online. Or I was also thinking, like, what is the probability, more of a conspiracy, Ryan, idea, that what if, people are moving their money, or they're just trying to shift assets between Iran and China, so between Iranian banks and Chinese banks. And that maybe is one of the reasons why they're trying to access this China. I think it was industrial bank. You can check it in the blog. And the other thing which was unusual to me was that certain Russian websites were spiking in Iran. For instance, google.ru was becoming more popular than another one, which is, I think, the poison.ru, which is kind of a shop where you can buy brands like Adidas and so on, was also becoming popular in Iran. So again, you may wonder, why are these Russian assets, websites becoming more popular in Iran at this particular time? So one possibility that came into my mind is that what if the number of Russian people is increasing in Iran? So they're like, their phones are trying to connect to Google RU because they're like set on Google RU from using them inside Russia, which would suggest some kind of deployment or an increase of Russian personnel in Iran, which, why not? It could be a possibility given the strong cooperation between Iran and Russia. I don't want to say that, Putin is deploying troops or special forces in Iran to help the regime, but this DNS spike is for sure
noticeable. It's like when you say spike, it's like significant.
It is. I mean, Google.ru was not in top 100 DNS requests coming from Iran last year. So it just entered in that.
Gotcha.
Then we have a bunch of other activities. If you have time, do take a look at the blog that I put together, such as IoT equipment, Chinese IoT equipment like Dahua cams, trying to contact their cloud. So probably beaming to the cloud over and over, generating a huge spike of DNS requests. But also things like Pinterest, which is interesting. I don't know, like, do you guys use Pinterest? Is this something popular in the States?
Oh, it's super popular.
It
I
is.
personally don't use it, but
I don't even know
I
what it is. I know it's a website with photos and people kind of put photos up
well
there. I don't know what you're
think of
supposed
it
to do with
like
it.
think about
So
like
old.
think about it like you're generating mood boards. So like if you're decorating a house, for example, you can just keep like a whole board of like pictures of like what things that inspire you that you like, and then from there it's easy to have a tie-in to like, well, would you like us to sell you that blue
Yeah, I
bookshelf you
see.
like, right? Like it's pretty clever as far as like a marketing thing, and frankly I kind of like the use case. I just don't use it myself. Like I've seen people who, for example, like for their tattoos, like they'll have a curated mood board of like other people's tattoos that look cool, and they'll go to that and be like, okay, what do I want, right? Like it's inspiring in a way.
Well, historically, Pinterest has been kind of less one of those platforms which was kind of less aggressively blocked in Iran because people, like you say, they post mostly fashion, recipes, cooking, Persian
Harmless
culture.
content.
So I would assume that now you can use it, yeah, to post other kind of things, other kind of these mood boards or shopping ideas or activity or pretty much everything else. By the way, another interesting spike in Iran was MikroTik.com. I don't know. Are you familiar? Like, are these popular in the States? The MikroTik routers, MikroTik equipment?
I don't know that they're as popular here, but people
Mm.
know them, right? Like MikroTik
They're
is,
cheap on Amazon.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
they're
it's
like,
one of those. If you go on Amazon and you're looking for a router, a cheap router, you'll get this Asus and MikroTik and these guys.
Mm.
to be fair, they are probably really popular here, and they may be even rebranded in a lot of things here, but they are like the garbage, like the trash router, right? Like the cheapest thing that you can get. And that means they're in a lot of places, right?
Which is sad. It's sad to hear because these are not your average Chinese routers. On the contrary, these are like really interesting equipments. And the company behind them is a Latvian company, and
Really?
they've been around for a long time. So the reason like why these are suddenly popular in Iran is fascinating. There is this NASNet Connect project, which is a kind of a mesh VPN, was specifically developed for Iranian Starlink users. So if you have one of these MikroTik routers, you can install the NASNet Connect module on it. And if you have a Starlink dish yourself, you can share your internet with the other people in this mesh router. But if you don't have one, you can kind of piggyback on other
And
people's
someone else's, yeah.
Starlink. Yeah, so it kind of creates this beautiful mesh internet, and people with Starlink can donate traffic, and so that the others can access the internet. And it runs on top of MikroTik. So I would assume, with no internet in the country, but suddenly you hear that if you have a MikroTik router, you can have internet access. I would assume they would make them very, very popular. So that kind of explains the reason why the spike, as well as, of course, these MikroTik routers themselves being connected through Starlink to the internet means that they're pinging their website for updates, firmware checks, and so on and so on. So kind of like fascinating how people are trying to go by bypassing the internet blackout in Iran and the methods that are used to go to the internet.
Do you guys have any visibility into if Starlink continues to work? I know that there's been some GPS spoofing activities happening, or at least Hamid talked about that last week. Do we have any sense that Starlink is continuing to work there?
Well, even Elon said that they are trying to deliver some kind of firmware upgrades that allow Starlink to use less the satellite GPS positioning and to use the satellites themselves more. According to Hamid, in reality, Starlink works better than what is being reported. So it works actually quite well, despite the jamming, despite all that stuff. With or without these new firmware updates from Elon, they are working pretty well. And thanks again to Elon. This is free for people in Iran, so they can just use Starlink for free if they have the dish. And then with mesh networks, so based like on MikroTik or other things, they can share the internet. So,
but this shit can't scale though, right? Like this is for you and your friends and family. It's not like you're scaling it at countrywide level to give people any sort of access to.
For your block, for your apartment building, things like that, I think it works.
I mean, but it's pretty high bandwidth, right? Like, you might be sharing
Not really. I can't do a fucking podcast on Starlink, dude. You saw me try to do
a podcast in the middle of a fucking
no,
civil war,
but that's
right?
what I'm saying. Like, I don't have enough bandwidth to do a fucking podcast.
What kind of assholes would be recording a podcast in the middle of a civil war? I mean, who does that?
We have listeners in Iran, by the way, according to our logs, according to our RSS logs. Costin, you were saying something.
I just like you were asking, like, what can you do? Can a country survive on one Starlink dish? I think it was around 2013, that I found myself in Cuba in vacation, and I learned that the whole country of Cuba was hitting the internet through a 100 megabit link. So that was like the whole country.
How long did it take you to send a text?
I tell you what worked. Pidgin worked, things like that. Instant messaging worked. Browsing the internet was basically impossible. And I was visiting one of my friends who was working in one of these companies in there, and I was complaining about the speed, and he said, do you want to see something? I said, what? Do you see this cable? Yeah. This is like 70 megabit internet connect. I said, like, holy shit, 70 megabits. And he connected it, and everything just started working. He said, keep in mind that you are now using 70% of the country's whole internet access.
Jesus Christ.
I'm saying, like, dude, we don't appreciate those things. That's why you're like, oh, who gives a shit? It's like a small link. It's like in those moments, in a moment of drought, that is actually like a really important connection, right? Like if you have nothing, then 100 megabits split amongst 500 people is still a lot. Like, it's still a really meaningful thing. Yeah.
On the cyber front, it just feels, or at least to me, and I've seen some commentary on it, that the Israelis are largely sitting out this Iranian unrest. Is that, and when I say sitting out, just on the cyber side of things, are we to assume that there's a lot of stuff happening that just isn't getting reported? I mean, if the internet is down, how can you do cyber attack against something that's offline? Like, what is the sense on, like, not to put you on the spot, Juanito, anything at all to the fact that we have heard nothing at all coming out of Israel?
I mean, I don't know that we're not hearing anything at all, right? Like, there's still some Adalat Ali posts, like, there's still some small things.
Right, but that's the point, right? It's like at a time like this, everything is just so
I told
subdued.
you I don't know anything. Obviously, I'm not in the minds of these folks, but I told you what my assumption around this is, which is that I think it speaks to the perception that maybe this is the real deal. Like, this is definitely like a critical moment in the country's history, and something big could change. And therefore, most people would assume that that means everybody's looking to, like, push this thing off a cliff. But in reality, if you think that this thing can actually fall off a cliff, the last thing you want is to be the guy whose hand is clearly the momentum, the impelling force, the cause of all of this shit. Because then when this inevitably becomes a humanitarian crisis in, like, one of the largest countries in the Middle East, what the fuck happens? Like, it's the same thing as like I'm sure the South Koreans think about North Korean, like what's going on in North Korea all the time. But do you think that South Koreans are really dying for unification right now? Like, North Korea is a failed state. It's basically a humanitarian crisis waiting to happen that would fall almost entirely on South Korea to logistically and financially manage. And all of a sudden you have a border with China. Like, is that really like what I assume is a
Right, but
bigger
it's
border with
pushing
China?
off the cliff the only option available?
No, the one you really want is for it to organically push itself off a cliff, and the people that did it are the people who are living it, and they will, in theory, self-organize into something organic that is friendlier and that you can support. The reality of regime change that nobody likes, including conspiracy theorists, including the people who think that like Henry Kissinger could have made anything he wanted happen in the world, is that you really don't control a whole lot. And this notion that you just go and like install governments and like install new presidents, and you just, if you just do a couple of messed up things, the CIA can just like collapse a country and then magic a new government there. It doesn't work that way. Most of the time, what you're complaining about, I'm not saying they didn't do anything. My point is, what you normally do is you destabilize what exists in the hopes of opening a power vacuum that can be filled by something else that exists, by some other organization, by, in the UK, what you think of as the shadow government, or basically like the other side that's just sitting there. They are organized, they are known, they're local quantities, they're people trust, that they just happen to belong to the opposing, party, and you're trying to position those people to take over. There's a reason that countries like Venezuela have zero appetite for opposition politicians. Same with Russia. You don't want there to ever be anybody to rally behind, right? Like, Navalny was never going to really get to live out his life comfortably, because do you really want people to think that there is a viable alternative? And the reason I say that is, if you were in the CIA or you were in the KGB and wherever, and you're looking at a country, and what you see is, yeah, we can destabilize this. You can destabilize anything, but there's no opposition. There's no leader. There's nobody organically to take over that we can trust, that isn't going to plunge this into further chaos. Then what you look at is, let's say, what happened in Iraq, which is things fall apart, and then the power vacuum gets filled by medieval era fucking plagues of trained armed militias who go around enslaving people and destroying historical artifacts and just trying to muscle their way into dominance. And those are like the state of nature type shit that we just don't think about. We assume civilization is so pervasive and inevitable that surely if we just destroy one government, then another one's going to rise up. And you go, no, the alternative is that no government pops up and those people live in chaos for however long it takes before something else fills the vacuum.
Costin, put a bow on this conversation with this. The work that you did on the blog documenting what's up and what's not and what's happening there, isn't there a fair assumption that this is happening at regime level in Iran, just to see how people are doing circumvention and like what is the feeling of what happens next?
Well, on the other side of the coin is in parallel, the government has been trying to promote some internal resources as alternative to this imperialistic Western services. So they're like pushing for Iranian-made search engines like Gurdu or Zarebin or Shadbin or Rizmon, and they have like Iranian map applications as alternative for Google Maps. So they're trying to get people to use these things, including like things such as internal messengers. Obviously, they have bigger control over those. And I was thinking this is not very different from what we have seen in Russia. So trying to replace YouTube with our YouTube, things like that. Facebook with Odnoklassniki. So you see the kind of the same pattern that regimes, they don't like when these services are pretty much uncontrollable, and they try to push people to use similar equivalents in their own areas. What worries me as a kind of general thought is to see the same kind of things happening in other places like Europe, I don't know, Latin America. Like, let's say if people in Europe are suddenly unhappy with platforms like X, try to ban them or replace them with some kind of an European alternative. That would be kind of the extreme outcome of this trend. But to me, I guess it expands a bit above Iran. Iran, what we are seeing here and in Russia are the extremes. We are seeing like what does disconnecting from the internet does in the end. And remember that Russia was threatening to also disconnect from the internet a couple of times, like over and over and over. And it does appear that, you know, people, especially people in power, they prefer this alternative. For you to use the local solutions to avoid these external platforms they cannot control, and try to use the internal resources as a means to influence people, to keep tabs on them for surveillance. And of course, I think that Iran and Russia, they're just kind of blueprints. Blueprints, and we need to be very mindful of these blueprints in order not to fall into the same trap in other places.
Speaking of imperial software and using imperial software, Reuters had their Shanghai and some Chinese reporting. Reuters claimed an exclusive on this, with Chinese authorities telling domestic companies in China to stop using cybersecurity software made by roughly a dozen U.S. companies, including some Israeli companies as well. According to the reporting, Broadcom-owned VMware, Palo Alto Networks, Fortinet were actually named among the US firms whose cybersecurity software has been banned. Like this kind of, America banned Kaspersky, so this kind of geopolitical banning of someone else's security software. Big story, small story. Juanito, do you guys do business in there, and are you named in there?
I'm pretty sure they put us on the list, which just means that just gives you an understanding of how performative this is, because like this is a nothing burger for us, right? Like who the fuck, like why are you operating in China in that way?
Meaning
That
you don't
said,
have any customers there? What do you mean by nothing burger?
No, like as in nothing direct, like we're not looking to do any business in China. And then that's where I'll leave it, because it's not my place to really talk about it.
No, I'm not asking you to speak for the company.
but
I'm just curious
yeah.
what you meant by nothing burger.
Well, I think my bigger point is we have seen this space balkanizing further and further. We've seen it happening in Russia for, however many years now, and China has already been there. They operate in their own fucking internet. So the idea that this is like, oh my God, they're not trusting us with their like security. That's not a global thing anymore. That was a delusion that we all got to play in for about 10 years while we were all still coming out of that like post-Cold War hangover where we all pretended we were going to sing Kumbaya and be friends and live in the same world. But that shit's over. It's been over. And the notion that you are going to trust your cybersecurity to foreign entities is ridiculous.
It's a non-starter,
So
right?
it's always
So
been
none
a
of this is a
non-starter.
shock, yeah.
Well, it's not a shock. It will be. I think it's mostly a shock to the people who want to pretend that this isn't happening and that you can play all sides all the time, which is mostly the mega corporations, right? Like the big ones, Google and Microsoft and Amazon and Apple and others they're trying to keep the peace because they've been trying to live in this illusion that like they can be global companies, and by virtue of that essentially be um, uh, detached from any one particular nation and not loyal or interested in the concerns of any particular country. Like I've said it before on this podcast, and I've like bitched infinitely, but like frankly, you are your American companies when somebody's attacking you, when somebody's stealing your intellectual property, when somebody's stealing your business or treating you unfairly. But your global companies, when the U.S. actually needs something, when we have any kind of problems, when we need you to step up for cybersecurity, or maybe not subcontract national security things to Chinese engineers and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of hypocrisy there that's entirely financially motivated. I don't think that people don't care about the US, or they're not seeing what's happening. They just want to, pad shareholder pockets for as long as possible before the gig is up. And we're getting to the point where those lines are becoming just spelled out. Like they're clearly on the tin. The map, the global map is being, somebody's taking crayons and like drawing lines, and companies are going to have to get real eventually. They're not going to do it proactively, but they have to get real eventually about where they can and can't operate. And until they make that a realistic adjustment on their price projections and shareholder value projections, they're going to have a bad time. Because if you're pretending that the total addressable market is the global market, then the day you have to be honest and say, actually, we can't operate in Russia, we can't operate in China, nor we manufacture in China, but we can't sell in China.
And your idea of TAM is completely different
then
from
your
what the
idea of
reality is.
TAM has been completely misscoped, and you're going to have to get real, and it's not going to look pretty for a quarter or two, but maybe you should have been thinking about, your business on more than quarterly cycles.
A point that has been made consistently on this podcast is companies like Palo Alto, Cisco, our cybersecurity companies, kowtowing to China, not releasing certain things, not researching certain things. The absence of IOCs might be tied to the fact that we have a factory in China, that we don't want to upset our Chinese ecosystem. Juanito, you've talked about this ad nauseum. Does this affect that? The fact that now you're kicking us out and we're not doing business there? Or the fact that Palo Alto still builds all their devices there is...
I don't know.
We'll still have that problem.
Well, I'll turn the question... I'll turn the question on to you, Ryan, because people know my views on this already. So... what I ask you is, like, you are admittedly a cyber crisis comms expert. Like, if anybody has dealt with this shit in a variety of places in some pretty bad circumstances, it's you. You look at this situation. You work at a big company. It has manufacturing. It doesn't want to deal in geopolitics no matter what. It doesn't want to admit that it's aligned with the US or with Israel or whomever. How do you handle this situation going forward? Like, how do you get real?
Yeah, the reality is you self-censor. I mean, this is the stuff you've talked about on the podcast. I was at Intel when the Biden administration first passed the rule around selling advanced chips to China. And I watched internally the reaction to this. And then there was a certain realization about market sizes and TAM. And I think that's the point you were just making about, like, there is no way we ignore this giant, massive thing over here and pretend that it doesn't exist. How do we get our legal structures in place to allow us, whatever bypasses, navigate this world and hope for geopolitical things to pass here and there? So I've seen it happen at big companies. I don't know what the answer is if you're a threat intel shop. I don't know if that guidance comes from above. We've talked about lawyers perhaps jumping in and making those decisions for folks. What I find is that people down in the trenches are going to self-censor based on what they think management wants.
What they're told management wants.
Right.
Like so I'll tell you this. If you're going to scope it down to threat intel, it's pretty easy. The truth is, the same way that it was when we were back at Great. People could have thought and hated and thought whatever they wanted about Kaspersky, but everybody respected Great Research because at the time, you were just telling it like it was about everybody.
But you showed your work too, right? Like
you showed your work. So like
beat that dead horse so much. Yeah.
The answer to innuendo is excellence and objectivity, in my view. But the problem here is not a threat intel problem. It's a wider company problem. Threat intel is but a small, tiny bit of what these companies do. I think the reality of it is that if you if you're serious as a company like Cisco, for example, like a big behemoth, you have manufacturing, you have global concerns, you're worried about markets at a completely different macro level, then we can accept the necessary painful hypocrisy of a couple of years where you kind of have to like grit your teeth and say, "Oh, yeah, China, you guys are awesome too. We don't care about Uyghurs either," right? Like you just kind of like you eat shit as a company and just smile and try to get through the rough patch. But the point is that if you're smart and you're being responsible, you're doing that as you try to develop alternatives so that you are not beholden to this government that is clearly holding, they have a grip on your neck and they're using it. So you better have been building manufacturing capacity in Vietnam. You better have been looking at like, well, how stable is our manufacturing line in Taiwan? What can we do in India? Which is Apple has been leading the charge on that. If you're not like, you have to pay attention to what Tim Cook and Apple have been doing for the past few years because they realized a little too late that they fell into a trap in China. That's why I kept telling everybody to go read Apple in China, go read Apple in China, go read Apple in China. It's not just because like I think it's a well-written book and it's a great argument, but it tells us a really key thing about how we got to the world that we're in 2026, which is Apple got tricked into training the Chinese to be the greatest manufacturing force of all time, not by sheer volume of people, but by actual sophisticated fine skill. So anybody that used to think about, like, we used to comfort ourselves thinking that the Chinese were just like a bunch of like, you just had this like slave labor at $2 a day, but it was all unsophisticated shit. They were just there like sewing and whatever. It's like, no, man, these people have been trained to build some of the hardest, finest things ever, which is why robotics are suddenly like an unbelievable thing. 3D printers are now like, I bought a fucking Bamboo Lab H2D. I don't know a fucking thing about 3D printing. I don't know anything. I haven't done anything. We literally plunked that thing down, plugged it in, like assemble, like put the things in their place. And then my dumbass is there with like an app. And I'm just like, I want a boat, click, and like this thing just builds a boat on its own. I haven't done shit. That is coming from that manufacturing capacity that Apple essentially gifted to the Chinese. Like the Chinese were operating at a deficit. The government was willing to subsidize companies to eat shit and give Apple their profit margins, quote unquote, while they learned how to do all these things. And now the Chinese are an incredibly sophisticated manufacturing force. So then the problem you get into is, yes, Apple wants to get out of the dependence with China. But what does that mean? Where do the billions and billions and billions come from to build an ecosystem of well-resourced, trained, but still cheap, dependable laborers in another country that is going to keep the regulatory regimes stable, that is going to think of you as like somebody that they need to prioritize, that isn't going to stop shipments someday because they suddenly want to change in policy, that like, that actually knows, moreover, has the ecosystem around it that you have in Shenzhen where you go, oh shit, we're missing this one part. Let me walk down the street because there's another factory that will build that part for me in a week, right? You don't have that. So that's why everybody suddenly was kowtowing to like to Modi and looking at India and going, well, are you guys going to become our manufacturing capacity? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, well, how about Vietnam, right? Like, are you guys going to be the ones? And the argument has been made now that like we just need manufacturing capability within our block. And so now we're all looking at ourselves going, so which one of us has enough like low wage labor and the ability to keep things stable and that can train themselves and that is close enough and that has the right resources and geographical distribution and cheap land and so that they can create a block. And it's like, well, no one in Europe, right? India's not looking that dependable right now. People are trying, but I don't know. The argument's been made that if that were to happen, it would probably be Mexico. And I'll just stop there because I've probably been ranting for like 15 fucking minutes, but you can see where the complexities lie.
Costin, according to the Reuters exclusive, Chinese authorities expressed concern that the software, this security software from US and Israeli companies, could collect and transmit confidential information abroad. How much do you think companies like, who are the companies named, Palo Alto and so on, are scrambling to create transparency centers in Shenzhen to prove that data doesn't in all seriousness, zero, right? The question is this a legitimate concern on the side of the Chinese authorities to say, hey, this is a legitimate risk to me that data could be transferred overseas?
I can't but notice the fact that this is quite different from the concerns that the West had about Chinese products like Huawei or about Kaspersky. If you remember, Western governments were mostly concerned about the fact that because the Communist Party, because of laws in those countries, the government could force those companies to potentially leverage their exclusive access through these products to launch destructive attacks. So remember, there were words such as like a rootkit level access, because it sits very low level in the operating system. It could do that and this. So the messaging from the other side was mostly about the risks associated with things that could happen if those governments really wanted to do something bad. In our case here, I think it's interesting that the concern is the other way around, that the software could collect and transmit confidential information. And I couldn't but wonder if there was something that actually triggered this concern. And there's in particular, two blogs, if you want, or two pieces of research that come to mind, and in my opinion, might be the ones that could be potentially responsible for this concern, which is one, if you remember the Pacific Rim research from Sophos, when they detailed all this access that they had to these
the implant episode, right?
The marketing telemetry statistics, enhanced
telemetry
visuals. And the other one, I think we talked about it as well, the Hunters blog, which was about the EDR usage, again, by threat actors. So I wonder if actually there was something that triggered the government into issuing these alleged letters, notifications. So they would stop using cybersecurity software made by a dozen firms from the US and Israel, which is also interesting that they say US and Israel, but they don't say, let's say, Japan, I don't know, Trend Micro or things like that, or Europe, I don't know, ESA. So they're probably concerned with some very specific software. That those software programs could be used to collect and transmit confidential information, absolutely. We know that telemetry can include all sorts of things, and which is why it is telemetry. So if you're concerned about this, you're probably going to have to do something about it. That's how EDR works. This is how all these things work. So yeah, there's some interesting differences, language differences here compared to Kaspersky, compared to Huawei. In my opinion, these kind of concerns about collecting and transmitting confidential information, they're more realistic than the concerns about, potentially using the products for destructive attacks in case of war.
Yeah, but it's a reality, though. I mean, that you could be prepositioning for destructive attacks in case of war.
It's a reality.
Come on, as soon as Ukraine went to war, we saw it happen.
Yeah, but what about this Toyota story, like from Germany? If you know what I'm talking about, we have it in our doc.
Yeah.
I didn't get to that one, so you guys got to
Wait, let me pivot to this VoidLink thing from
all right.
From Checkpoint, because I want to stay in this Chinese space here. Checkpoint is published pretty interesting research on VoidLink, calling it a cloud-native malware framework, advanced malware framework made up of custom loaders, implants, rootkits, and modular plugins designed to maintain long-term access to Linux systems. Appear to have been built and maintained by Chinese affiliated developers. There's no affiliation and there's no real details there. I want to ask a question. What is a malware framework for the audience thing? Why do you call it a framework? What is a malware framework and what is Checkpoint talking about here?
That's another way of saying this is a kind of professional platform which doesn't include just one simple malware, but it's a kind of galaxy of plugins, very flexible building blocks, bricks, if you want, which you can put together in like Lego fashion to create whatever you need. So you need like escape from a container, you put the plugin or the brick for container escape. You need the exfiltration through ICMP, you add that particular plugin. So something which is very flexible, configurable. You can deploy it in many different ways. It can suit
automatically
all
suggest
purposes.
professionalism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Automatically suggest APT, or we've seen malware frameworks in the criminal ecosystem. I'm just asking for the purpose of the audience.
It's fair questions, and we've seen them in the criminal ecosystems as well. But I think that they are typically the trademark of advanced government-sponsored adversaries. So think of, I don't know, Equation Group with their platforms. Think of Reagan with their Reagan platform. Think of kind of those things which are like highly configurable, running in memory, plugins hidden in the registry, leveraging sophisticated exfil, mesh networks, peer-to-peer networks for command and control. I would say that they are the trademark of advanced nation-state-sponsored adversaries. But every now and then you see something cute on the criminal side as well.
Well, I think it's also it's definitely a mark of a certain amount of sophistication on the engineering side. But to the point of what Checkpoint is describing here, it that also applies when you're talking about a certain commercial efforts, right? Like wanting to provide a commercial capability for a specific subset of folks. This is like an appealing mechanism to provide, because what you're basically saying is we're not going to sell you like a single strain of malware or some shitty implant that you could just as easily replace with Cobalt Strike. What we're doing is giving you a semi-proprietary capability that's not readily available to everybody with a support contract that works in such a way that has established interfaces so that you can expand it and we can build modules for you. And you don't have to keep re-engineering this thing over and over and over and over again. Instead, it will be the stable base on top of which you can then deploy specialized modules and you can then update for specialized whatever, but you have you can outsource the maintenance and support of the main platform to an outsider, right? To a Linchpin Labs or to whomever the fuck in China has been developing PlugX and then developing ShadowPad, which there was not to pimp our own stuff, but pimp.
This is the place to pimp your own stuff. Who else is going to pimp your stuff?
Joey Chen pushed out a blog at Sentinel One. This was easily 3 years ago. He's over at Trend Micro now, I believe. It was about some of like the management infrastructure of ShadowPad. And for those that do know, like ShadowPad has essentially become the modular framework of choice for a bunch of Chinese APTs, a bunch of what appear to be a bunch of like Chinese government orgs that seem to be contracting this framework that is maintained by certain players that I think some of us are familiar with or that are known from like back in the day in the Chinese ecosystem. It's very likely that PlugX was a very similar situation. So what you look at is these are examples of commercial enterprise that's providing a maintained framework that is being sold only to a subset of a certain type of threat actor, which is essentially like a gov-only thing. It's their version of a PSOA, essentially. So this is a thing. I'm not entirely surprised to see somebody else going that route. Clearly, the Chinese market is showing that you can be successful with this approach. But you know, it's always interesting to see a new capability come up. And the question I would ask is it the same dudes? Because ShadowPad and whatnot is a Windows specific framework, and this is a Linux specific framework. And I go, you know, is this their attempt at branching out, right?
Was exactly my feeling here. I was wondering, is this the new ShadowPad? Because I mean, we've been kind of waiting for a while to see the next iteration in the ShadowPad story, to see what's next. Are they like abandoning it? Because there's been so many blogs recently in the past years about ShadowPad, including the one that you mentioned, Juan. Mandiant also published one about Scatterbrain, this custom packer used by the people behind ShadowPad to obfuscate it and the plugins. And I was wondering, this has a certain ShadowPad, I don't know, flavor, if you want. Is this a new iteration? Is it like a new ShadowPad?
Did you get IOX, Costin, when you looked at this VoidLink thing? Is there any, what's the natural next progression of taking this information and doing something, either as a hunter, as a defender? What is the advice?
Absolutely. So, I mean, Checkpoint, they publish some of the best technical blogs
shout
in
out
the
to Checkpoint.
cybersphere. Shout out, of course.
I mean, if we're gonna shit out people all the time, let's make sure we give.
Man.
And they did share like a couple of hashes, stage 0, stage 1, some of the plugins. I still don't know if I grasp the whole story and what exactly they found here and how they found it. Then does it feel like, maybe it feels to me that they have the whole package? And
I mean, they have the C2 client. Like, how did you, you know, that's different, right?
Correct, right? So they have what people are calling, like typically these are called the builders and the controller in that sphere. So they seem to have maybe a bit more, which is
linger there for a second for those of us who are not in the trenches like you, and explain what you're talking about. That something was held back from this research, you're saying?
No, what I'm saying, it appears. So like I remember every time we published a blog, our guys would say, you need to do an interview with Kim Zetter. God bless Kim Zetter. And Kim Zetter, the first question and I knew she was gonna ask that, and I was like always, you know, I was sweating and being very stressed because I knew she will ask. The first question will be, how did you find this? And I was like, how do I say it? Like,
Kim is no bullshit, man. You're not just gonna sell her a fucking story.
And by reading the story here, I would love to see Kim Zetter do an interview with the researchers here and write, you know, the full picture. Like, how did you find it? Where did it come from? What do you have? Do you have the controller? Do you have the builder? Like, again, specific terms used by these Chinese malware developers. The controller is in theory different from the command and control server. It's kind of a client to the CNC, which allows the operators to interface with the live victims through the CNC. And the builder produces the malware that you deliver to the victim. Sometimes they are like packaged into one binary, which can be at the same time builder, CNC, and controller, as it is the case with some ShadowPad versions. In other cases, you know, they're separate modules. So I would be curious. Yeah, shout outs to Kim.
Shout out to Kim Zetter. Shout out to Checkpoint for sharing what they did. More of these, please. Nothing this week from Amazon Threat Intel team. I'm very disappointed in
I think CJ's on vacation, bro. You gotta give him a break. Let CJ Moses take a break, bro.
Oh no.
But this week we had Microsoft Patch Tuesday. Microsoft dropped 112 new CVEs in Windows Components, Office, Azure, Microsoft Edge. One marked as exploited in the wild, CVE 2026-20805. And the credit is to the Microsoft Threat Intel Center and Microsoft Security Response Center. Costin, so there's an OD in the wild exploited. Did you put these IOCs into your system? What did you find about this OD?
Which IOCs, brother?
What?
where do you see them?
This
I'm
is
sure
my
they're
point,
being
right?
privately shared to very important people, only important people, nobody else. So.
You're
Right, I
laughing at
bring
me.
this up.
You're laughing because there was just like very quick side story here, because Microsoft also published another thing
Yes.
this week about this
Red.
takedown.
Yeah.
The takedown of Red VDS, which is a very cool blog. It's like there's a lot of screenshots, and I was going through the blog and I was thinking there's gotta be some IOCs. There's gotta be some things in there. And like I finished reading the whole thing, and there's like not even the domain for this Red VDS in there. I'm like, seriously, who is the audience for this? Like, why are you publishing this blog post about disrupting cybercrime? And there's not even redvds.pro or redvds.com or redvds.su Soviet Union or redvds.ru, which are we're dropping IOCs live on the podcast.
And this is from the Threat Intel blog, right? There was two things. There was one on the policy people saying, hey, by the way, we worked with XYZ and we did this massive disruption. And here's a link to the technical description of the thing. And you go there and you get this inside Red VDS, how a single virtual desktop provider fueled worldwide cyber criminal operations. And then you get nothing. I mean, in the way of technical details.
The funny, like the irony here is that you go to the complaint, like to the legal document, which is this PDF scanned from a printed paper. So it's like one of these old school papers, printed, scanned in 2026. And there are some bit of more details in that printed legal PDF for the takedown notices, because they actually Microsoft took over these two domains. If you go right now to redvds.com, it displays this Microsoft takedown notice, which, by the way, let me just open it right now because I thought it was interesting. The language, it says this website domain has been seized by Microsoft. Like typically you see this website has been seized by the FBI. Right. But now it says it has been seized by Microsoft. So it's not often that you see private companies
cyber offensive operations, brother. Cyber offense. Sure. I mean, Google is building a disruption unit to do this, right? I mean, they've publicly said it, and we were wondering what it looks like. This is what it looks like. It's no longer FBI doing this thing. Private companies are doing this thing. Shout out to Jamie Levy and Huntress, the Huntress folks. Remember this blog we complained about with this, where they had a rare look at this insider attacker operation. Jamie says the host name popped up in this Microsoft blog around Red VDS, so we know that there's some active activity happening there. Juanito, any thoughts on this Red VDS thing before we move on?
No, I have no thoughts. I have
none whatsoever.
I don't think at all. Like I don't know, dude.
You ignored it.
Well, yeah. Honestly, I've grown to just ignore Microsoft stuff because this kind of thing
is it that bad? I mean, Microsoft is one of the most important player in our. I mean, as a platform provider, as an ecosystem, I can't understand a world where you just ignore what they say.
I'm ignoring it because it's not that it's that bad; it's that it's not that good. So, what the fuck do I need to give you guys brownie points for just showing up and like tossing a couple of fucking domains at us? Fuck off. Like, I'm unimpressed. You have so much talent at home. If this is what we can get out of you, whatever, dude. Like, I'm over it. Just fuck off.
Let me move on. We got a blog post out of Project Zero this week on a Pixel Zero click exploit chain. And it's fascinating to me because, we talk about this all the time. Everyone's shoving AI into everything. AI here, AI here, AI here.
You love it, man.
Project Zero folks are saying, listen, several AI-powered features have been starting to pop into mobile phones. And one of the effects of this change is increasing zero-click attack surface. And they figured out that incoming SMS and RCS auto attachments received by Google Messages in the Pixel, this was a Pixel-specific research, are automatically decoded with no user interaction. which means that audio decoders are now in O-click attack surface on most Android phones. And then they got two CVEs demonstrating an attack chain that pop pixel devices and saying, listen, this could be across the board on Android phones because these fucking dumb AI-powered features are being dropped in everywhere. We don't hear often from Project Zero on this stuff. This is some work from Natashenka and Natalia Silvanovich. These people do some of the most impressive work. What did you make of it, Costin? What do you make of this? You had a different reaction to this story than I did.
Oh, I will let Juan start.
No. I didn't get to it.
Come on.
Ryan pointed me to this link like 20 minutes before this thing started. It's like a fucking like 5,000 word report. Do not.
You know me.
It's
I
not
read
that
between the lines. I don't have the patience. So no. Like these are like really huge. So if you open the link, then there's like several parts. Part 1, part 2. I know part 0. You open them and they're like huge. And you know me, I'm
this
like
is what we want, though. We ask for technical documentation. We ask people to show their work. Why are you belittling people showing their
because
work?
I page down. You know what I'm like looking for.
Fucking speed readers.
Page down, like indicators of compromise. Page down. Oh, no indicators. Well, I'm nitpicking, obviously, but what I was thinking here is it's a bit of a strange blog, and I was just imagine like the Toyota security team warns about the fact that Toyota cars have dangerous the seat belts that don't work. And I'm like, what? What's going on here? Like, are they talking to each other? Like, what was the reasoning behind designing Google Messages to automatically decode SMS and RCS audio attachments? Why do you do that? Like automatically?
Because you have to provide audio transcription on demand for AI stuff. Because my earbuds have to listen on AI and do magical AI things. So now you're gonna slow it up with like encryption. Like, what are you doing? No, I get the point you're making. The point you're making is like Google Project Zero is saying, look at our company doing this dumb shit. Like, why, right?
Yes, that's one. And the other is like I'm asking, who is the audience? Who is the audience for that?
Maybe the audience is the Google people who are doing this. Maybe Project Zero is trying to signal internally.
No, like a lot of these blogs are actually details on how to develop an exploit for this thingy. Like, oh, they're like, it's so difficult to develop the exploits because these Google guys are good. So it's super difficult, but we are also very good. It doesn't matter if we are both in Google. But like, watch us develop the 0 day here through 20 pages. This is how you develop the 0 day. And I wonder,
part 2 and part 3 coming.
Yeah. The audience like can only be exploit developers. I mean, the only people who can make use of this information are exploit developers. So
I disagree with you completely there. I know where you're going with this argument, but the idea that this information is only useful to exploit developers is crazy.
Tell me who else you can use this information.
The people building this shit that has to decode this SMS and RCS audio attachments. The people get understanding how the
popcorn watching this discussion.
The people understanding how
reading the blogs. Do you really think they would be reading the blogs and be ashamed and change what they're doing, or what?
No, it's education for them in how exploits work, how exploit writers think,
the
how
open
they go
source
about.
community. It's
be more
taken so
effective
well
in communication by just publishing a New York Times blog post or article where it says that these features are extremely powerful and precise, or something along the lines.
Look, guys, what are we asking for, though? To be honest, right? Like,
Costin is asking for none of this exploit writing tutorial because it only goes to bad guys. Is that what you're saying? Is there okay?
Well,
and instead I would be asking for detection strategies for exploits targeting this class of vulnerabilities. What kind of detection strategies? Yara rules. Even if they maybe find something similar in the wild, I want a full description of what they found in the wild. And I mean, let's be serious. Like, Project Zero has been discovering a lot of things in the wild, and unfortunately we don't get to see or to read any of those in detail. So whenever maybe there's like a description of one of these things, there's typically very little information, sometimes no IOCs, no hashes.
But
So this is what I'm saying.
and your
here,
argument
that,
is whenever there's this big fancy, here's how amazing
Yeah.
we are at writing exploits, then you get these 4-part
Mhm.
long 50-page things, and it doesn't match like the providing value to the rest of us. Is that your
not
argument?
to the rest of us, to the rest of me at least. I don't know about you guys, but perhaps
The
they
many
provide
Costins out
value
there.
to you, Ryan. Provide value to you, Jax. I don't know.
None of this is a
Look-
new argument, Juan. I mean, since the 2000s, we've been talking about exploit people publishing too much. I think this, by the way, I think this is part of the Microsoft kind of fading back,
yeah,
the
I
Igor
think
conversation.
That's
I
why
showed the
I'm
blog.
worried.
I
That's
showed
why
the
I'm
blog
worried.
like before the show. I showed the blog to my cat Luna, and I said like, what do you think? She said like, are there any hashes? I said no hash. I don't care.
Juanito,
look,
go.
I agree with you, Ryan, that this is part of the argument that's sort of receding. The truth is that we need to be careful about overextending our expectations to the point of essentially sounding ungrateful, like nothing is ever going to be good enough, right? Project Zero does amazing, unbelievable work that nobody else seems to be willing to fund. So I don't really want to come down on Project Zero because they're providing all this great shit and they're not providing even more than what they're already providing. They're already doing something amazing. Now, please, like, let me break this down in like multiple steps, because a part of that is I agree with Costin in that the draw of Project Zero as early as the Ben Hawks days was, we are going to not just chase the tail of, oh, here's a no day, here's a no day, look at everything that's possible, look at all the stunt hacking that's possible, look at these random vulnerabilities, but instead to take a more like scientific approach of saying, okay, this is a class of problems. How do we create mitigations that will thereby eradicate a whole class of vulnerabilities? Because we know that there's no such thing as squashing these things one vuln at a time. And I would argue, without much sense of the trend, that Project Zero has influenced and done a whole lot, at least in the Google ecosystem, to eliminate certain classes or make certain classes of vulnerabilities a lot sparser, a lot harder to hit, a lot harder to run into. Are they fixing the whole world? No. Is there some way that they could probably influence the building of these things more securely? Well, you know, if Google wanted to pair them with an open source library team that somehow puts out, you know, better tooling that people can readily use that will thereby not inherit or somehow avoid these, yeah, that's a possibility. Sure, there's always more that you can do. I think Project Zero is doing their part and doing it quite well. I think what we're complaining about is that Google has the resources to subsequently also provide us with context and threat intel findings and surrounding infrastructure, and this is where we found it, and this is where we saw it, and this is what you guys should look into, and they don't. And that's sort of, you know, some of the legacy stuff around threat intel. Oh, good thing Ryan's muted so he can't interrupt me. This is some of the stuff around this like legacy threat intel mentality at Google, where you know you don't provide information because you pretend that it somehow is like a better thing to just keep people uninformed, and you're the only ones who are like gonna protect us. The one last point I want to make is it is a bad faith argument to adopt that idea that, oh, you're just helping the attackers as an excuse for what Microsoft's doing. We can look at Google and say, hey, you guys should give us more. You have more, you can give us more, we could do with more. Sure, and that's a reasoned argument that we can have with Google, but you cannot fault them that they're not investing into this, that they're not trying, because they are. Project Zero is an expensive fucking project that they've been running for a long fucking time, that's caused them all kinds of heartache, and they continue to support it. Microsoft is not doing any of this shit. They're not providing us any intel, not about the vulnerabilities, not about the context of how they're being used, not about the exposure that customers are seeing, not about the incidents that they're finding these things in, not about any of the intel that they're...
I think Juanito stopped recording. I don't know what happened. I just got a notice that Juan need to stop. You want to log out and come back in? Costin, I don't think that's the argument you were making, though. The argument you were making is that they over-index on like real blow-by-blow documentation on the exploit side, on the blow-by-blow of how exploits should be written and how change could be done, and under-index on some of the defensive things that they can and should be sharing to help the rest of us kind of protect our environments.
More like it comes from this primal fear that we developed back in the days that when you write something or you make a presentation or you show something, don't show too much that could help the bad guys develop something, malware, exploits, Trojans, whatever. So perhaps, yeah, it comes from that school of thought that I grew up with. So I'm not saying, of course, it's super, super valuable, and it's kind of scary because they say these are now zero-click attack surface of most Android phones. And typically, a lot of people I was talking to were saying, Apple's iPhones, they're like terrible because they come up with built-in zero-day attack surface from the factory through iMessage, through FaceTime, and so on. And Android is safe because on Android there's nothing. But I think that situation is also changing a bit with this RCS and SMSs with audio attachments and the automatic processing, and the play field is being leveled between Android and iOS, and at least Google has an advantage. They have this Project Zero, and where is the Apple Project Zero team writing about similar attack surfaces and root causes?
We get a blog once a year from the SEER team. Ivan Kirstich, if you're listening, blog some more. We want to hear from you guys.
Look, I think that I love that. I love that Riverside somehow saved Microsoft from like a truly extensive rant.
We got the Microsoft rant in, I think.
Well, what I was going to say is, look, this is a bigger problem, and I think fuck Microsoft or Apple or any company in particular. That's not the extent of the issue. The problem here is that so many of us came out of the intelligence community or have been playing next to the intelligence community. And we came out of that shit thinking that it's perfectly reasonable to sit on actionable information for the promise of a future strategic payout. You need to protect sources and methods. We need to protect how we're getting this intelligence so that our decision makers that we're supporting have some strategic choices to make down the line that are more important than playing whack-a-mole. And therefore, it's valid, and moreover, it should be the default stance to hold information for its future value.
This was the Igor keynote. And as I understand it, this was kind of the essence, not necessarily
Igor,
the wording.
Like
but
he's just a dilettante that
Igor,
showed up
I mean,
from a
the
consulting.
CISO of Microsoft.
Yeah,
right?
I'm saying fuck him because he's just somebody who showed up from a consulting company. That this is not his space. He's just taking advantage of the information space that we've created. All of us that came from the IC, all of us that have been intelligence analysts, all of us that got into the threat intel space and embraced it. We thought, we accepted that it was normal to hold on to information for its future value. And that's a normal thing in the intelligence community. The problem is, as I wrote in 2015, we are not in the intelligence community. We are not supporting any kind of strategic decision makers. We do not actually have strategic sources and methods that we need to support to the point that we should not take tactical advantage of the information that we have on hand to defend people. This intelligence, this information does not have long-term value. It does not. We need to stop pretending that these IOCs are like that their value increases or sustains over time. They have value in a very short opportunity window in the very beginning. Yeah. And they need to be spread as far and wide as possible because we've also seen that threat actors do not leverage that intelligence quickly or strategically either, but they sure as shit move a lot faster than we do. And they're trying to attack a lot more people than we are. And this notion of playing secret squirrel is starting to genuinely disintegrate the value of what we do. And it's being taken advantage of by consultants pretending to be security people like Igor and his buddies, like a bunch of other fucking executives who say, oh no, the risk is too high and the intelligence value is in the long-term sustaining of our collection. No, we shouldn't help all of these fucking journalists and all these people that are getting attacked right now because we need to be able to know what is happening long-term. And you're like, well, long-term, what the fuck do you plan to do with it? Well, absolutely nothing. But then the journalists will be gone. Nobody's going to be paying attention to what we're doing and we can keep selling our stuff. And you go, well, that isn't the mission, right? That's not security. That's not what we're supposed to be doing here. So you can go do that as like a generator of stakeholder value. But as far as being a cybersecurity person or any kind of defender, do not cloak yourself in our mission because that's not what you're doing.
I just find it fascinating that Natashenko on Project Zero writes a blog post about AI-powered features being shoved into phones, causing a big problem. And then the next line in our prep doc is a joint statement from Google and Apple that they're going to be shoving all of Google's Gemini AI into our iPhones.
Bro, Apple has no choice, man.
That's what I was going to say. Let's do a quick 5-minute AI segment on this big news that Apple and Google is now in this big multi-year collaboration under which I guess Apple Intelligence is now dead. That big thing that they pushed to us that was I think was being powered by OpenAI. Is this a big dramatic business shift where OpenAI is out and Google is in?
I don't think it's a big dramatic business shift if you like. It's easy to look at it on the surface level and say, you know, Apple Intelligence was quote unquote powered by OpenAI, but the truth is that they just tacked it on as like a shitty API call, and it wasn't doing much of anything to power Siri or anything like that. And I say it's not a big shift because if you're an avid observer of Apple's business practices, they've had a deal with Google for Google search for like decades. A decade.
Correct.
So like this has been a partnership that's been going on for a while. I've said it before. Apple does not look at Google as a competitor. They are part of an ecosystem where they work together, and it works well. Like Apple is not a big software company. I know that sounds silly, but like they don't really think of themselves that way. They're not a big services company, which is also why their services kind of fucking suck. Like there's all sorts of ways in which that company looks at itself as a products company, and they're interested in hardware, and they're interested in thinking of their users in that way. And that's also why they solve some of these problems the way that they do. I think it's also more of a statement of, if you get real with what's happening in the AI space, Google is like the only sure bet. It's the only safe bet. Everybody else is in a rough space. And
really?
They're trying to
because of the economics?
Because of the economics, because most of this stuff is being run at a loss. Like, and it's expensive, not just to build, but also to serve and to maintain. You have electricity issues, you have data center issues, you have GPU cost issues, there's so much investment that has to go into it. And a part of it is that the AI people, the dogma that has fueled the past few years of development is that the solution is almost entirely in scaling, which means the only way this is going to work is if we spend more, not make it cheaper, not find a way to make it useful while being sparse. It's only through spending more. So you have these companies that are burning resources in order to do what they're doing, and they don't already have an existing business and an existing distribution platform and an existing brand and an existing customer base that they can just tap into to do this. They're doing it through taking on more and more VC investment, and then setting that money on fire, trying to make it to the big thing. And it's why I look at Google and I'm like, look, the only sure bet here is Google, because it's DeepMind as a frontier lab inside of a company that already has a customer base. It has at least 7 more than billion active users products in its portfolio. Which means it has a go-to-market strategy. It also has deep pockets that are getting readily refilled by their ad revenue, which means when they operate at a cost, it's a strategic decision that isn't killing them. Whereas the way that Anthropic and OpenAI have to work is kind of to like stab themselves and try not to bleed out on the way to the hospital. Like it's like there's a very weird strategy where you're trying, it's like chemo, right? Like you're hoping that the chemo kills the cancer before it kills the patient. That's the way that investment is going into the AI space for everybody except Google. So I see Apple just kind of playing into that right now.
Do you see maybe Chinese phone vendors like Xiaomi, I don't know, partnering with DeepSeek to deliver something similar?
I think, I don't know. I'm sure that we're gonna see these AI plays, and they probably already exist. I mean, I don't know how well like aware we are of what happens in the Chinese ecosystem, but AI is being embraced and marveled into the ecosystem in China much more easily because you just have an easier distribution system. You don't have an expectation of privacy. You don't have concerns about who is getting my data. They were getting my data anyways. You have easy centralization. Like QQ is, we all use QQ. We all use WeChat. Like the whole society already uses these things. So if you want to put AI into making those things work better, I'm not sitting there going, who's this new company that's getting all my data? Who's this new thing that I need to pay? No, it's just like, oh, everything gets more convenient. Everything gets nicer. So in their version of the world, AI is an enabler that it isn't the forcing function for new trade-offs. It's just an additive feature. For us, you have to sit here and go, ah, shit, do I actually want this random new company to have my likeness? Do I want them to have my emails? Do I want them to see my messages? Do I want them to be on my computer? It's 7 different companies on my computer now. One of them owns my browser. It's doing API calls and sending my data to another provider. Like there's so much friction and fragmentation that adoption, it's not seamless. You're not just excited. You don't just walk into it and go, oh, Claude on desktop, cool. You go, Claude on desktop, what the fuck is it going to have access to? Do I need to make sure it doesn't delete my hard drive? Like what is it going to call and exfiltrate and do along the way? It's not as easy a path towards to the water, right?
Apple said that this Apple Intelligence will continue to run on Apple devices and private cloud compute. We had discussed that in the past, which was their kind of like stuff that had to be passed off to the cloud was going to go through a new encryption ecosystem that would not expose user data with and then the promise is a more personalized Siri coming this year. Are you excited and energized about a more personalized Siri? Do you have hopes that Google technology somehow makes this better? Is it just going to be Gemini, the Gemini experience on the iPhone? What are we expecting?
So I have hopes because I want to believe. I want to have hope because the landscape right now is so sad. Siri is such a piece of shit. No, Siri, no, stop. The Siri is such a piece of shit that like, it's just so awful that it's ruining the top tier of consumer products that we all buy. It makes it feel archaic. So Gemini is genuinely really fucking good. It's a really good model. It's good at tool calling. It's very smart. It's integrated with search as you would expect in a good way, which means that Apple has the right raw materials to create and to inject an assistant that we all could actually benefit from, actually want to use, that would drive this notion of like what is the value of AI that people are supposed to be extracting? Well, if it was already on the device that already controls all of my life, including my food ordering, how I get to places, how I communicate with my friends, how I send emails, how
Or
I do
my
my work,
G-Docs.
it's all fucking there already. So if they could just get out of their own fucking way and do this right, this could be truly life changing to a lot of high end, wealthy consumers, but a lot of US consumers. And I would love to see that happen. I don't really give a shit where the AI comes from. I just think Apple is in a very precarious position and they need to move forward. Do I think that this is their winning move? No. I think that, frankly, I'm amazed that Apple is not moving forward to buy Anthropic or OpenAI. These two are sitting, yes, they are huge investment black holes, but if there's a company that has enough money to make that work, it's probably Apple. Is it the best move for OpenAI or Anthropic? Not necessarily. The better move would be if Amazon or somebody else who actually has data centers decided that they were going to be the ones to do the play. But look at the space, man. Like Microsoft has already kind of done this for themselves. They've created this black hole for OpenAI, and Sam Altman seems to be desperately trying to outrun the gravitational pull of that Microsoft black hole before it swallows OpenAI. But
Can I tell you,
it shows you the play.
when I look at Anthropic Cloud Cowork, this new thing that came out this week, and the addition of a use case beyond chatbots to answer questions, I kind of feel like this is the first time something feels a little exciting since we first saw the first chatbot. Have you gotten a chance to play with Cloud Cowork at all? And like, why does my iPhone do this for me? Like, this is what I'm hoping the promise of a Google Apple collaboration with a more improved Siri does for me. I can tell Siri to organize things in my life and stuff. Like Cowork,
Yeah.
have you played with that at all?
I played with it. I looked through it. I'm mostly a big Claude Code user already. So Claude Cowork, it doesn't feel like a big change for me, but that's because I was already getting Claude Code to do that through the terminal, and I'm a much bigger I prefer to
You're
be
the
a
haves.
keyboard.
You're
I prefer to
among
be
the
a keyboard
haves, yeah.
cowboy. I wanna be on the terminal, right? Like CLI and terminal ninjas are where it's at. I love the fucking terminal. If I can stay in the terminal, I will. But
this exposes it to the rest of the world.
this is doing a lot for more people. It's like getting it more for information workers, and I'm sure it's gonna look. It's not just Claude Cowork. If you were paying attention, there's also the Claude Chrome browser extension, which gives Claude Code control over a browser instance without it having to live inside of the browser itself. So now the way that they've played this ecosystem, I think is quite brilliantly. Like Anthropic has really found a way to differentiate themselves and to make themselves the owner. We always knew they were looking to own coding, and coding was the lingua franca of tech. So it was a worthwhile effort. But I think it all finally is coming together for them in a really pretty way, where like you can have Claude Code on the web, you can have Claude Code in your terminal, you have Claude controlling your browser. Now you have Claude as a desktop app, which we've had for a while to like control your queries. And now that same app can also do the MCPs, and it can do this Cowork thing of like kind of doing some like computer control. And when you put it as like a unified suite, now you can say you have an actual assistant that can take some level of autonomous action for you without running off on its own too much. And that's been the problem.
There's multiple millions, perhaps billions of dollars invested in AI startups that are promising this kind of real agentic thing to do these tasks. And now you look and you see, hey, how are these guys going to compete with Anthropic if the Frontier Labs get it right?
I think that to be honest, I'm not sure that there are billions invested into companies doing that specifically. Like, I don't know that there's enough invested
AI
into
companies
that.
in general, and the majority of them are promising agentic kind of,
But here's my issue. I don't actually think that enough money has been distributed to companies that are supposed to do use case stuff. Because a lot of the VCs have like gotten very scared that they were going to invest into something, and then a frontier lab was going to show up 12 months later and say, oh, we offer that as part of our $20 subscription because the model is so good, so we don't need that. And thereby their investment into this random company that was just supposed to do like document management for legal companies, but with AI, is all of a sudden rendered moot. The reality of go to market is not that. And they should know that. The VC should know that. It's just that they're so used to selling things on the basis of hype rather than building companies that generate money that they're scared that they can't keep the hype train going when OpenAI says, "Oh, we already do this." But it's not about the fucking hype train. It's about producing capabilities that make it to customers who are willing to pay for it long term. And that's the thing that, like, look, Claude is doing all this cool shit. It's great. It's a part of your subscription. But I'm not building my entire company on a plugin that a company does as a side project around their main product. And that's the thing that VCs, I'm guessing we're going to have to wait until the real market correction comes and everybody's really bleeding. And then you're going to go, well, maybe we should invest money into companies that make money. And it'll be like, wow, like what a fucking investment thesis you've just come up with. We should make you like king or something. Fucking genius.
Costin, have you put co-work into some threat intel, threat hunting use cases?
No, I admit not. Like in this field, at least on my side, there's more and more interest toward using local models, as you know, giving all your data to the big houses. So people try to leverage GPT OSS 20B, things like that, 70B. Some of the new Gemma models from Google that came out this week are also quite interesting, with the ability to translate between languages. So to be honest, yeah, on my side of things, people
anything
are
out of
more
our
into
French friends at
using
Mistral?
locals.
Any new?
Remember that I was one pitching it like
Yes.
some time ago, right? But
I always wonder about Mistral. Every time I see one of these announcements, I'm like, the DeepSeek isn't sitting back in China. The folks in Europe aren't sitting back. Everybody's looking to innovate somewhere. Anything fresh coming out of there?
the only constant thing is change. The fact that every day there's a new model that is better than the one that was better yesterday. So
Yeah.
it was, I don't know, it was first Grok, then Gemini Pro 3.0 came and it's better than Grok. Then a new Grok came, it's better again than Gemini. Then like every day there's like this constant shift between which one is better. And I tell you, today I keep trying to use LLMs for Yara rules generation, and it's just not
there yet.
It's like so bad, and like it doesn't understand what you're asking from the models. And today it was the first time I felt like was it like Obi-Wan in Star Wars when he says, "Oh, I felt a big disturbance in the Force." I asked Grok to make a Yara rule for something, and the result was just like,
Yeah.
I felt the disturbance in the Force. So,
Really?
So
yeah, today was the first time.
So I think, Costin, like, honestly, we should just get on a call together and build up an agent for writing rules together, because like the issue that you have is an uneven distribution of the state of the art of how these things actually work. And the companies, as I've said many, many times, don't have an interest in actually showing you what works best. They're too busy building the models up to be better. But there's two trends here that we should think about. One of them is that model architectures are starting to change, and people want them to change, because the idea of spending hundreds of millions of dollars on multi-month data crunching runs to generate new models is economically unsustainable. It's actually kind of ridiculous, especially when you consider that those models are so overloaded with data that they're not really reasoning all that much, and they're spewing a lot of outdated information, which means that you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars to make something that is aging. So there is a big push inside of the AI space to find what the next way of creating or improving these models is that isn't about size. You don't just want a bigger dick on this one. Like, you want to figure out how to use it well. You just, like, forgive me. We're getting into the lewd
What?
side of this one. Like,
That
it's
is
a dick
crazy.
measuring. It's a dick measuring contest, man. Like, walking out there and being like, I have a trillion parameter model. You're like, great, it's bigger, which means it's more expensive, it's harder to run, it's bigger. Like, I need a bigger piece of hardware in order to be able to run it. And is it any better? And what we've actually been seeing is that, yes, scaling does a lot, but that doesn't make it consumable or something that you can push. What has been actually really useful is the distillation and the ability to make these things smaller and more efficient and able to run on less expensive hardware is where you get to have a margin. That is where you get to have better tools. So you're seeing things now like RLM, like these like recursive approaches to managing the models that are having like amazingly outsized results. And another thing that really matters here, and this is a very long-winded way of saying this, is any time that you see OpenAI, both OpenAI and Gemini provide this capability, anytime you see the feature to turn on agent mode, all that means is that you're letting them provision a Docker or a VPS that lets the thing have tools. And it turns out that when you give these things tools, that they outperform massive other models. So what we're missing here is just a basic understanding of how you're supposed to duct tape this shit together to make it work for your use case. So, Costin, again, very, very long-winded way of getting to, when you want to build a Yara thing, the problem is that we're basically trying to get this model to one-shot a Yara rule, to make it up in its mind. And the only person I know who can do that is you. In this entire planet, in this entire industry, the only person who can write a Yara rule just by looking at a thing is you. And in most cases, what people need to do is use some tools, make a thing, try to run it, see some errors, fix the errors, refine the thing. And then after doing that enough times, they build up some databases and they build up some other tools and they get better at doing it. And the truth is that that's all we need to do for the model to write Yara rules itself. You need to put it in a system, give it some tools, let it test against Yara as an actual runtime thing, let it test against a set. You need to marry Clara and Grok or Clara and Gemini or whatever, and then it will get extremely good at writing Yara rules. We just
I
need
don't
to
know why
duct tape
writing
it the
Yara
right
rules
way.
Don't misunderstand. I thought it was beautiful. Everything you were saying, and that's exactly what I am doing. I'm just like looking at the problem from a different point of view. And I don't know if you have seen The Thinking Game. I think it's called
Yeah.
The Thinking Game, right? Documentary with them.
It's up for free on YouTube, yeah.
It's up for free. There was like one point in there which kind of, it made me think about the evolution of models. And he says when Kasparov was playing Deep Blue, for him, the most amazing thing was not that actually Deep Blue, an optimized machine, was playing chess so well. For him, the most amazing thing was that Kasparov, a human, was playing chess so well, and at the same time, he was still a human, being able to do everything else that a human can do. And this is exactly what shocked me today, that these models, which generally they're good at certain things they've been trained for, but at the same time, they're like naive and fail miserably at other things. Like, for instance, at chess specifically, if you tried back in the days to get ChatGPT to play chess, like it would play a terrible kind of chess. Like, just imagine pieces out of nowhere, materialize them on the board, like several queens, like they fly in 4 dimensions, appear like a wrap around the board. It would just like made no sense. And like what was scary for me today, and the thing that I've been waiting for, was the moment when these things, which are good at, I don't know, writing poems, doing analysis, suddenly they become good at everything generically, including Yara rules. So like that was a kind of the moment that I noticed today when this Yara rule came out fine in the first try, and I was like just positively shocked that maybe we've just reached that moment when it's not necessarily impressive that they can write amazing poems and they can analyze your data, but they can do all that and still develop Yara rules and be a human at the same time.
Juanito, a couple of quick hits, and I just want you to answer in one sentence. No tangents. Sean Planky has been renominated to lead CISA again. His previous nomination was kind of held up in some politics and some committees, blah, blah, blah. Renominated, expectation that it gets cleared this time. Does CISA have a head of a director 3 months from now?
I have no fucking clue. I have no idea. I honestly do not know. But at the risk of, you said no tangenting. I'm not so worried about who runs it. I'm more worried about, for example, like the CISA 2015, the law that had been used for like providing protections for companies to share information with the government. That stuff is expiring, and they're having a really hard time bringing it back. So like, I'm not worried about the director of CISA. I'm worried that the underlying mechanisms that made them able to do anything are starting to also fall into the sea. So
Right.
it's more
But there's
about
a leadership. There's like a leadership vacuum there. The deputy director had polygraph issues. We have the director not clearing nominations. So there's there's a leadership vacuum there somehow.
But at the same time, CISA is not the one that's gonna make that law work. Like, that's Congress. So like there's a bigger, cybersecurity is a matter of cohesion. It's a multi-stakeholder game. That's why you always had this like public partner nonsense being like the main line, but the idea being like no one person can make this all work. Seeing the mechanisms by which public and private sector got comfortable playing with each other in the first place start to expire, that worries me more than whoever the fuck is supposed to be holding the wheel at CISA. So that's how I'd like to reframe that.
Costin, you get to close the show with some shout outs quickly.
I did like shout outs all throughout this episode. So just one thing, by the way, I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but it's been like some terrible cold here in Romania. It's been like freezing cold. A lot of people have died because of the ice and cold. So my shout outs were just like, stay safe. Keep the ice out. I don't know, like shovel the snow, be safe, take care.
Juanito?
Okay, so
thoughts?
A few actual shout outs for a change. Well, I will be keynoting Echo Party Miami, so I hope people will join us. Like,
congratulations.
I'm very proud, very happy to support. I love Echo Party.
That's happening in March, right? Mid-March.
May.
May.
I made the same mistake.
I'm confusing it with RSA.
Yeah. Fuck RSA. Let's focus on Echo Party. Hopefully, it'll have the same Argentinian charm and that same welcoming atmosphere that makes the Echo Party such an amazing place to go for more than 20 years. Similarly, folks, like Reverse has been an amazing conference for the RE focused people. I think tickets are still for sale. They already announced the speaker lineup. I'll be there. Friends will be there. It's been a really nice
January
conference.
24th, which is 2 weeks from now, right?
This is the second one. So, go get your tickets while you can. Support these folks. Like, they're doing something great.
The agenda is out. It just came out yesterday, I believe.
Yeah.
So
and it looks good.
It
looks good. The talks were good last time, and they have some nice training. So that's me plugging it just because I love it. I liked it, and I want them to do well. And then just a few random shout outs to our friend Pasquale, Rational Edge. The t-shirts here. He's doing great stuff for folks that are looking for some, actual threat intel platform made by people who do this kind of analysis. Our boy Ruben Santamarta, who we mentioned briefly, amazing researcher, amazing work. Definitely check out some of his, reporting beyond, the stuff that we discussed today. I'm trying Pedro Mamini's Maestro. He's built this like AI conductor tool. It's been actually really fucking cool. So shout out to Pedram. If you guys haven't tried it, like it's all the Claude Code stuff and open code and whatever, but he built it in a way where you just do like a conductor session and it runs by itself. It like builds the plan and it just tells you when things are done and when it needs your input. It's really fun so far. And one last thing, Costin, I can't believe we talked about MikroTik, and we wouldn't give him a shout out as like the terrorist router of choice. There's a reason Slingshot and all these other projects love MikroTik routers. Everybody's got to have a nice MikroTik Ode. How else do you track your,
I
you know?
totally forgot about that.
So, you know,
Slingshot.
just a bit of backstory for you folks.
Quickly before I show my shoutouts goes to our sponsors, Material Security, for continuing to support the show. Love the love that we get from those guys. And to my buddy Rob Reagan is planning his Nebula Fog Part 2 in March in San Francisco. So Nebula Fog AI Hackathon. Juanito, we got to get you out there. Last year it was amazing. And I know Rob has some additional plans for the hackathon this year. At this stage, with all this co-work stuff, I'm pretty excited about what that brings. And that's our show for this week, guys. Thank you for hanging out. Be safe, be good.
Take care, guys.
Bye bye.
Paka paka.